Welcome back. 81 years ago today, about 14,000 Canadian troops stormed the beaches in Normandy, France, part of the Allied invasion that marked the beginning of the fall of Nazi Germany. Tens of thousands of U.S., Canadian, and British paratroopers were dropped behind enemy lines, paving the way for the invasion force, which landed on 5 beaches. Now, this is the only known footage of the men from Canada's 3rd Infantry Division landing under fire on Juno Beach. They successfully took the beach, suffering heavy casualties, and by evening, Canadian soldiers had advanced further inland than the British or the Americans. Now, for more on this, I'm joined by historian Craig Baird, the host of the Canadian History EHX podcast. Craig, thanks for being with us tonight. How did the Canadians capture Juno Beach on D-Day?
Well, like you said, it was a lot of intense fighting because they were dealing with what was essentially Fortress Europe, and that meant taking part of Juno Beach. And like you showed in the graphic, there were several other beaches, but Juno Beach was the objective for the Canadians. So it was 14,000 Canadians who landed at Juno Beach and were able to fight through some pretty heavy defenses in order to get as far as they did. And that kind of began what became the Battle of Normandy and the eventual breakthrough into the Netherlands, France, and later on Germany.
How heavy was the Nazi pushback on this invasion?
It was very heavy. I mean, again, we were dealing with Fortress Europe. You were dealing with the Nazis who had a lot of fortifications there. They were waiting for an invasion. And even though there was a lot of secrecy to this, there was still the expectation that that was probably going to be where they landed. So there was a lot of pushback by the Nazis. There was a lot of counterattacks. It wasn't an easy fight by any means. And there was a lot of Canadians. There was, of the 14,000 Canadians, we suffered about 1,100 Canadians casualties, and that included 381 killed in action on the beach.
Wow, that's a lot for one day. What about our airmen and sailors? How did they contribute to victory on D-Day?
Well, we contributed quite a bit. We had about 124 Canadian vessels that supported the invasion. This included vessels that were dropping off landing craft. There were vessels like HMCS Algonquin that were firing on targets. So we were a very big part of the sea invasion. But then also, like you mentioned, the RCAF had a very important role. It was targeting various fortifications, as well as paratroopers who were jumping behind enemy lines and being able to advance to the Germans from the back. So we had actually, the RCAF and the RCN were a very important part of the D-Day landing that often does get forgotten about in terms of landing on Juno Beach.
How significant was Canada's contribution to the overall victory? We hear lots about the American contribution and the British contribution. What about the Canadians?
It was very significant. Like was mentioned, we advanced farther than the Americans or the British. But when you hear about D-Day, they usually say thank you to American and British and allied nations. And it was Canada that was the other nation. We're often forgotten about. We're not in the movies or anything like that. We played a very important role in D-Day and then the eventual Battle of Normandy, as well as the liberation of France and the Netherlands and the eventual push into Germany. But again, we don't make a lot of movies about ourselves, so we tend to not have as much press as it is worldwide about our contributions when it comes to something like D-Day, but we were critical.
An important reminder for us as we unify in the face of these threats of American tariffs. Craig, thanks so much for your time tonight. That's Craig Baird, the host of the Canadian History EHX podcast.